Marcus Williams adjusted his worn baseball cap as he settled into seat 23B, the middle seat of the cramped economy section. The red, white, and blue embroidered letters spelling veteran stood out against the faded navy fabric. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he buckled his seatbelt, a reminder of the roadside bomb that had changed his life forever in Afghanistan 15 years ago. The 47-year-old construction worker had saved for months to afford this flight from Denver to Chicago. His daughter Sarah was graduating from nursing school, and nothing could keep him from being there. Not his tight budget, not his fear of flying, and certainly not the chronic pain that shot through his left leg every time the weather changed. As passengers filed past him toward their seats, Marcus noticed the stark contrast between his section and the premium cabins up front. Leather seats, extra legroom, and flight attendants offering champagne and warm towels. He'd never experienced such luxury, but he wasn't bitter about it. He'd learned long ago that some things in life were worth more than money or comfort. The plane was nearly full when Jessica Montgomery, a 28-year-old flight attendant with perfectly styled blonde hair and a crisp uniform, began her routine safety check. She'd been working for the airline for 3 years and took pride in maintaining order and following protocol. Her sharp eyes scanned each row, ensuring seatbelts were fastened and carry-on items properly stowed. When Jessica reached Marcus's row, she paused. Something about the man in 23B caught her attention. His cap, his posture, even the way he gripped the armrest suggested he was nervous about flying. She'd seen many veterans on flights before, and most seemed comfortable with air travel given their military background. This passenger appeared different, almost out of place. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass again," Jessica said, her voice professional but slightly suspicious. Marcus looked up, confused by the request. He'd already shown his boarding pass to the gate agent, and again when boarding. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Marcus asked politely, reaching into his jacket pocket for the crumpled boarding pass. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded it, a detail that didn't escape Jessica's notice. "I just want to make sure you're in the correct seat," she replied, examining the document. Everything appeared to be in order, but something nagged at her. She developed a sixth sense about passengers who might be trying to pull something over on the airline. Marcus noticed her scrutinizing gaze lingering on his veteran's cap. He'd worn it on this special day as a small source of pride and comfort. The cap had been a gift from his daughter when he'd returned from his second deployment, and wearing it made him feel connected to his military family, especially when he was nervous or uncomfortable. "Thank you, sir. Everything appears to be correct," Jessica said, but her tone suggested she remained unconvinced about something. She moved on to the next row, but Marcus could feel her eyes returning to him periodically as she continued her pre-flight duties. The plane's engines roared to life, and Marcus gripped the armrests as they began taxiing toward the runway. His breathing quickened, and small beads of sweat formed on his forehead despite the cabin's cool temperature. Flying wasn't something he'd done often, and the sensation always reminded him of helicopter rides in combat zones, bringing back memories he'd rather forget. A businessman in the seat beside him noticed Marcus's discomfort. "First time flying?" the man asked with a friendly smile. Marcus shook his head, managing a weak smile in return. "Just don't like it much," he admitted. "But my little girl is graduating nursing school tomorrow. Wouldn't miss it for the world." The businessman nodded approvingly. "That's wonderful. You must be very proud." Marcus's face lit up for the first time since boarding. "More proud than I can put into words. She's wanted to be a nurse since she was 8 years old. Says she wants to help people like the doctors helped me when I came back from overseas." As the plane lifted off the ground, Marcus closed his eyes and thought about Sarah. She'd been his anchor during the darkest days after his injury, visiting him in the hospital, helping with his physical therapy, and never once complaining about the changes in their family circumstances. Her mother had left shortly after his return, unable to cope with his PTSD and physical limitations, but Sarah had remained steadfast in her love and support. Jessica continued her service rounds, but She found herself repeatedly glancing back at the veteran in 23B. Something about his demeanor struck her as inconsistent with her expectations of military personnel. In her experience, veterans were typically confident, composed, and comfortable with travel. This man seemed anxious and out of his element. During the beverage service, she approached his row with a new strategy. "What branch of service were you in?" she asked casually as she handed him a coffee. Marcus looked up, surprised by the personal question. "Army, ma'am. 2 tours in Afghanistan." "What unit?" Jessica pressed, her training in customer service protocols warring with her growing suspicions. Marcus hesitated for a moment, not because he was lying, but because talking about his service often led to questions about his injuries and the circumstances that ended his military career. "3rd Infantry Division," he answered quietly. "Lost my squad leader and 2 good friends to an IED in Kandahar province. That's where I got this." He gestured vaguely toward his left leg. Jessica noticed the slight tremor in his voice when he mentioned his fallen comrades, but she interpreted his emotional response as possible deception rather than genuine grief. "I see," she said curtly, making a mental note to keep watching this passenger. In her mind, real veterans were proud warriors who wore their service like a badge of honor. This man seemed broken, defeated even, which didn't align with her preconceived notions about military heroes. What Jessica didn't understand was that Marcus carried invisible wounds that ran far deeper than his physical injuries. The nightmares that still woke him in cold sweats, the guilt over surviving when his friends didn't, and the struggle to find purpose in civilian life had left him feeling like a shadow of the confident young soldier he'd once been. As the flight continued toward Chicago, Marcus tried to focus on the positive. Tomorrow he would watch his daughter walk across that stage, diploma in hand, ready to begin her career helping others. It would be one of the proudest moments of his life, worth every penny he'd scraped together for this trip and every moment of anxiety he was enduring on this flight. He pulled out his phone and looked at a photo of Sarah in her nursing school uniform, her smile bright and confident. She had his determination and her mother's intelligence, a combination that would serve her well in her chosen profession. Marcus had always told her that the greatest victory in his military service wasn't any medal or commendation, but coming home alive to be her father. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing Marcus to grip his armrests tightly. His breathing became shallow, and he closed his eyes, trying to use the relaxation techniques his therapist had taught him. The businessman beside him offered some reassuring words about turbulence being normal, which helped Marcus regain his composure. Jessica observed this reaction from across the aisle, further cementing her belief that something wasn't right about this supposed veteran. In her limited understanding, she expected military personnel to be unflappable in stressful situations. She didn't realize that combat veterans could develop anxiety about situations that reminded them of trauma, or that seeking help for mental health challenges required tremendous courage, not weakness. As they began their descent into Chicago, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and excitement. Soon he would be on solid ground, and tomorrow he would witness his daughter's greatest achievement. The difficult flight would be worth it when he saw Sarah's face light up as she spotted him in the graduation audience. Little did Marcus know that his journey was about to become much more challenging, and that an encounter with the flight attendant who'd been watching him would test his dignity and resilience in ways he never expected. The Purple Heart medal tucked safely in his carry-on bag, intended as a surprise gift to show Sarah during her graduation celebration, would soon become the center of a confrontation that would change multiple lives forever. As the plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, Marcus Williams felt a wave of relief wash over him. The landing had been smooth, and he was one step closer to seeing his daughter graduate. He gathered his small carry-on bag and waited patiently for his turn to exit, his mind already focused on the hotel where he would spend the night before tomorrow's ceremony. Jessica Montgomery had other plans. During the flight, her suspicions about the nervous veteran had only grown stronger. She'd noticed how he fumbled with simple requests, how he seemed unfamiliar with military terminology when other passengers asked him questions, and, most tellingly, how he'd reacted with what she perceived as excessive anxiety during routine turbulence. As passengers began filing off the plane, Jessica positioned herself near the exit door, ostensibly to bid everyone farewell. When Marcus approached, she stepped slightly into his path, causing him to pause. "Excuse me, sir. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Marcus stopped, confused by the request. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, shifting his weight to ease the pressure on his injured leg. Other passengers began to back up behind him, creating a small traffic jam in the narrow aisle. "I need to see some identification," Jessica announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Military identification, specifically. Her voice carried an accusatory tone that immediately drew attention from other travelers and crew members. "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus asked, genuinely bewildered by the request. "I showed you my boarding pass earlier. Is there some kind of security issue?" "I don't believe you're actually a veteran," Jessica stated bluntly, her words cutting through the ambient noise of the cabin like a knife. "I think you're wearing that hat and claiming military service to get special treatment or sympathy from passengers." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Around him, conversations stopped as fellow passengers turned to watch the unfolding drama. He felt his face flush with embarrassment and anger, but years of military discipline and civilian struggles had taught him to keep his emotions in check. "Ma'am, I assure you I serve my country honorably," Marcus said quietly, hoping to defuse the situation. "I don't understand why you think otherwise, but I can show you my discharge papers if necessary." "Discharge papers can be faked," Jessica responded, emboldened by what she mistook for his defensive posture. "Real veterans don't act the way you've been acting on this flight. They're confident, brave, not jumping at every little bump of turbulence." An elderly woman behind Marcus gasped audibly at Jessica's words. She'd been watching the interaction with growing disbelief, having served as a military spouse for 30 years. She knew that combat veterans came in all shapes and sizes, with various responses to trauma and stress. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice remaining steady despite his rising anger. "I earned the right to wear this hat through 2 deployments and injuries sustained in service to my country. I don't need to prove anything to you." "Actually, you do," Jessica insisted, her own anger building. "There are laws against stolen valor, and I've seen enough fake veterans trying to take advantage of people's goodness. I'm calling security." The phrase "stolen valor" sent a ripple through the nearby passengers. Several people pulled out their phones, some to record the confrontation, others to research whether flight attendants had any authority to make such demands. The businessman who'd sat next to Marcus stepped forward. "Excuse me, miss, but this gentleman told me about his daughter's nursing school graduation. He seemed genuinely proud and concerned about making it to Chicago on time. I don't think he's trying to deceive anyone," the businessman said diplomatically. "You can't always tell," Jessica replied dismissively. "Fraudsters are getting more sophisticated. They know exactly what to say to pull at people's heartstrings." Marcus felt the situation spiraling beyond his control. What should have been a simple flight to his daughter's graduation was becoming a public humiliation. He thought about Sarah and how proud she would be to see him tomorrow, how excited she'd been when he told her he would definitely be there despite the expense. "Ma'am, I understand you're just doing your job, but you're making a mistake," Marcus said, pulling out his wallet. "Here's my military ID card, my VA benefits card, and if you need to see them, I have my discharge papers in my bag." Jessica examined the documents suspiciously, looking for signs of forgery. The military ID appeared genuine, but she'd heard stories about sophisticated fake identification being available online. The VA card meant nothing to her, as she didn't understand the bureaucratic process veterans went through to obtain medical benefits. "These could be fake too," she announced. "Anyone can order these online. What unit did you say you were in again?" 3rd Infantry Division, ma'am. I was a staff sergeant before my medical discharge," Marcus replied, his patience wearing thin but his military training keeping him respectful. "What's your MOS?" Jessica demanded, using military terminology she'd picked up from movies and television. Marcus realized she was testing him with questions she probably didn't know the answers to herself. 11 Bravo, infantry, light weapons specialist. He answered automatically. Look, ma'am, I just want to get to my hotel and rest before my daughter's graduation tomorrow. I've answered your questions and shown you identification. What more do you want? I want you to admit you're not really a veteran, Jessica said loudly. I want you to stop disrespecting the memory of real heroes by pretending to be something you're not. The accusation stung more deeply than any physical wound Marcus had received in combat. To be called a fraud, to have his service questioned, and his sacrifices dismissed by someone who had never worn a uniform or heard gunfire, felt like a betrayal of everything he'd endured. Ma'am, Marcus said, his voice beginning to crack with emotion. I left pieces of myself on foreign soil. I watched good men die. I came home broken in ways you can't see, and I spent 15 years trying to put myself back together. I would never dishonor their memory or my service by pretending to be something I'm not. But Jessica was too committed to her position to back down now. She'd made her accusation publicly, and admitting she was wrong would mean acknowledging her own prejudices and lack of understanding about the realities of military service and its aftermath. Say the sob story, she said coldly. I've heard it all before. Real veterans don't need to justify themselves with emotional speeches. The cruelty of her words sent shock waves through the cabin. Several passengers began expressing their outrage, some calling Jessica's behavior disgusting and demanding to speak with a supervisor. Others started researching the airline's policies on their phones, looking for corporate contact information. Marcus stood there, absorbing the humiliation and trying to process what was happening. He thought about his daughter, about how proud she was of his service, about the Purple Heart Medal in his bag that he planned to show her as a reminder that her father was a hero who'd fought for freedom and justice. A young soldier in uniform who'd been seated near the back of the plane had been making his way forward during the confrontation. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez had been listening with growing anger and disbelief. She stepped into the circle that had formed around Marcus and Jessica. Ma'am, with all due respect, you need to stop this right now, Rodriguez said firmly to Jessica. I'm active duty military, and I can tell you that this man's responses and documentation are consistent with genuine service. More importantly, your understanding of how veterans behave is completely wrong. How do you know? Jessica challenged. How can you be sure he's not just a good actor? Because, Rodriguez replied, her voice rising, real veterans know that trauma affects everyone differently. Some of us are confident and outgoing, others struggle with anxiety and social situations. Some love to talk about their service, others find it painful. There's no single way that veterans should act, and your stereotypes are harmful and ignorant. The intervention from an active service member should have ended the confrontation, but Jessica had gone too far to back down gracefully. She was about to double down on her accusations when a new voice joined the conversation, one that would change the entire dynamic of the situation. What exactly is going on here? The voice belonged to Captain Robert Chun, the pilot who'd been making his post-flight checks and had heard the commotion from the cockpit. His presence immediately commanded attention and respect from everyone in the cabin, including Jessica, who suddenly realized that her accusations might have consequences she hadn't considered. The confrontation was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would not only vindicate Marcus Williams, but also teach everyone present a powerful lesson about judgment, respect, and the true meaning of service. Captain Robert Chun emerged from the cockpit with the authoritative presence that came from 20 years of military service, followed by 15 years of commercial aviation. At 58, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd commanded respect in both military and civilian settings. His pilot's uniform was impeccable, his silver hair perfectly groomed, and his expression serious as he assessed the tense situation in his aircraft. Ms. Montgomery, he said, addressing Jessica with a tone that immediately conveyed his displeasure. Please explain to me why you're detaining passengers and making accusations about military service. Jessica straightened her posture, realizing that her supervisor had arrived and that her actions were now under scrutiny. Captain Chun, I suspected this passenger of stolen valor. His behavior during the flight was inconsistent with what I'd expect from a real veteran. Captain Chen's expression darkened as he processed her words. Inconsistent with what you'd expect? And what qualifications do you have to make that determination, Ms. Montgomery? Well, I've worked with many passengers over the years, and veterans are usually more confident and composed. This gentleman seemed nervous and anxious throughout the flight. Jessica explained, her voice becoming smaller as she realized how weak her justification sounded. I see, Captain Chen replied, his tone carrying a weight that made everyone in the vicinity lean in to listen. He turned to Marcus, who stood quietly with his documents still in hand, dignity intact despite the public humiliation he'd endured. Sir, I apologize for this completely inappropriate situation. Would you mind if I looked at your identification? Captain Chen's request was respectful, almost deferential, a stark contrast to Jessica's accusatory demands. Marcus handed over his military ID and VA card without hesitation. Captain Chun examined them carefully, not looking for forgeries, but reading the details with the understanding of someone familiar with military documentation. Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, 3rd Infantry Division. Captain Chun read aloud. Purple Heart recipient, Combat Infantry Badge, 2 tours in Afghanistan. He looked up at Marcus with respect in his eyes. When were you wounded, Staff Sergeant? October 15th, 2009, sir, Marcus replied, automatically using military courtesy. Roadside bomb outside Kandahar. Lost my squad leader and 2 others. Captain Chen nodded solemnly. I'm sorry for your loss and for your wounds, both visible and invisible. The last phrase carried particular weight, acknowledging the PTSD and emotional trauma that often accompanied physical injuries. He turned back to Jessica, who was beginning to realize the magnitude of her mistake. Ms. Montgomery, this man is a genuine American hero who sacrificed his health and well-being in service to our country. Your accusations are not only wrong, they're deeply offensive. But, sir, he seemed so nervous during the flight. Jessica protested weakly. I thought veterans were supposed to be brave. Brave? Captain Chen's voice rose slightly, causing nearby passengers to pay even closer attention. Do you know what real bravery looks like, Ms. Montgomery? It's getting on an airplane when flying triggers memories of helicopter crashes in combat zones. It's walking into crowded places when you've been trained to scan for threats and improvised explosive devices. It's continuing to live and love and contribute to society when part of you died on a foreign battlefield. The captain's words resonated through the cabin. Passengers who had been recording the confrontation now found themselves witnessing something profound and educational. Staff Sergeant Williams, Captain Chun continued, addressing Marcus directly, your anxiety during this flight doesn't make you less of a veteran or less of a hero. It makes you human. Anyone who's seen combat and doesn't carry some emotional scars is either lying or hasn't been in real action. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes, not from sadness but from relief and gratitude. For the first time since the confrontation began, someone with authority and understanding was validating his experience rather than questioning it. Furthermore, Captain Chen said, turning back to Jessica, your behavior today has violated every principle of customer service and basic human decency. You've humiliated a decorated veteran based on your ignorant assumptions about how trauma survivors should behave. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had remained nearby during the exchange, stepped forward. Sir, if I may add something? Captain Chen nodded for her to continue. This kind of stereotyping hurts all veterans, Rodriguez explained. It creates impossible standards that ignore the reality of military service and its aftermath. Some of the bravest people I know struggle with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Their wounds are invisible, but they're just as real as any physical injury. An elderly passenger who had been watching the entire confrontation spoke up from her seat. My husband served in Vietnam, she said, her voice carrying across the cabin. He never talked about his service for 30 years because people expected him to be a certain way. When he finally got help for his nightmares and anxiety, his life improved dramatically. This young woman's attitude is exactly why so many veterans suffer in silence. Captain Shin seized the educational moment. That's exactly right. Military service affects everyone differently. Some people thrive in civilian life, others struggle. Some are comfortable talking about their experiences, others find it painful. There's no right way to be a veteran. He looked around the cabin, addressing all the passengers who had witnessed the confrontation. What you've seen here today is a prime example of how harmful stereotypes and assumptions can be. This gentleman served his country with honor, was wounded defending our freedom, and came here today to support his daughter's graduation from nursing school. Instead of receiving the respect he's earned, he was subjected to false accusations and public humiliation. Marcus found his voice again, strengthened by the support he was receiving. Captain, I appreciate your words more than you know. I just want to get to my hotel and rest before tomorrow. My daughter doesn't know about my Purple Heart medal yet. I was planning to show it to her after her graduation as a surprise. You carry your Purple Heart with you? Captain Chen asked, his respect for Marcus clearly growing. Yes, sir. I don't usually, but this is such a special occasion. Sarah has always been proud of my service, and I thought seeing the medal might help her understand that her old dad really did do something meaningful, even if I came back a little broken. The emotion in Marcus's voice affected everyone in the cabin. Several passengers were openly wiping away tears, moved by his love for his daughter and his humility despite his sacrifices. Captain Chun made a decision that would surprise everyone present. Staff Sergeant Williams, I have a proposal for you. But first, I need to address something with my crew member. He turned to Jessica with an expression that left no doubt about his feelings regarding her conduct. Ms. Montgomery, your behavior today has been completely unacceptable. You will be filing a written report about this incident, and I will be recommending immediate retraining on sensitivity and customer service. You will also personally apologize to Staff Sergeant Williams. Jessica's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she recognized that she was in serious trouble. Staff Sergeant Williams, I apologize for questioning your service and for the way I treated you. I was wrong. The apology fell hollow and forced, but Marcus nodded acceptance anyway. He'd learned long ago that holding on to anger only hurt himself, and he had more important things to focus on than Jessica's ignorance. Now, Captain Shin said, turning back to Marcus with a smile, about that proposal. I think there's a way we can make sure your travel experience improves significantly, and that your daughter gets to see just how much respect her father truly deserves. Marcus looked puzzled, unsure what the captain could possibly mean. Around them, passengers leaned in with curiosity, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The confrontation that had started with false accusations and humiliation was about to transform into something entirely different, something that would restore Marcus's dignity and provide a powerful lesson about honor, respect, and the true meaning of service. What Captain Shin had in mind would not only vindicate Marcus Williams, but would also create a moment that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. Captain Shin reached into his uniform jacket and pulled out a small leather folder. Staff Sergeant Williams, I want to show you something. He opened the folder to reveal his own military identification and several commendation medals, including a Silver Star and Purple Heart. I served as a helicopter pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan, Captain Shin explained. 2 tours like you. I was shot down in 2007 and spent 3 months in military hospitals recovering from my injuries. I understand what you've been through, both overseas and since coming home. Marcus stared at the medals in amazement, recognizing the significance of the Silver Star in particular. Sir, you didn't have to share that with me. Actually, I did, Captain Shin replied, because what happened here today cannot stand. You've been treated disgracefully by someone who doesn't understand the first thing about service, sacrifice, or the challenges veterans face every day. The captain closed his credential folder and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. I'm upgrading you to first class for any future flights with our airline. But more importantly, I want to make sure your daughter sees exactly how much respect you deserve. I don't understand, sir, Marcus said, confused by the captain's meaning. Tomorrow is your daughter's graduation, correct? What time does the ceremony start? Captain Chin asked. 2 o'clock at Northwestern Memorial Hospital's nursing program. Marcus replied. Sarah is in the top 10% of her class. She's worked so hard. Captain Chin smiled warmly. I have a proposal. I'm scheduled for a flight tomorrow afternoon, but I'm going to request a schedule change. I'd like to attend your daughter's graduation ceremony in full uniform to present you with something that every veteran deserves, but few receive: public recognition of your service and sacrifice. The passengers around them listened with growing amazement. Several people began applauding spontaneously, moved by Captain Chin's gesture of solidarity and respect. Sir, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't ask you to change your schedule for me, Marcus protested, overwhelmed by the offer. You're not asking. I'm insisting, Captain Chin replied firmly. Do you have your dress uniform? Marcus shook his head. No, sir, I don't. I haven't worn it since my discharge ceremony. To be honest, it probably wouldn't fit anymore anyway. That's no problem. I know where we can get you properly outfitted. There's a military surplus store here in Chicago run by a veteran who keeps dress uniforms in all sizes for occasions exactly like this. He's helped dozens of veterans prepare for weddings, funerals, and special ceremonies. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped forward again. Sir, if you don't mind, I'd like to help coordinate this. Staff Sergeant Williams deserves to have his service properly honored, especially after what he's endured today. That's an excellent idea, Sergeant Rodriguez, Captain Chin agreed. Can you help Staff Sergeant Williams get to the uniform store and ensure he has everything he needs for tomorrow's ceremony? Absolutely, sir. It would be my honor, Rodriguez replied, turning to Marcus. Staff Sergeant, I know this city well, and I know exactly where Captain Chin is talking about. If you're willing, I can help you get everything sorted out tonight. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the kindness and support he was receiving from fellow service members. After hours of humiliation and doubt, he was being embraced by people who understood his journey and respected his sacrifice. I can't let you both go to all this trouble for me, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Staff Sergeant Captain Chin said gently, You went to considerable trouble for our country. You put your life on the line, you were wounded in action, and you spent 15 years dealing with the aftermath of that service. Helping you prepare for your daughter's graduation isn't trouble, it's privilege. The businessman who had sat next to Marcus during the flight pulled out his business card. Excuse me, Staff Sergeant Williams. I'm a hotel manager here in Chicago. I'd like to comp your room tonight and tomorrow night and provide transportation to the uniform store and to your daughter's graduation ceremony. That's very generous, sir, but I can't accept that, Marcus replied, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Yes, you can, the businessman insisted. It's a small way for a civilian to say thank you for your service. Please don't deny me the opportunity to do something meaningful. An elderly woman who had been watching the entire confrontation spoke up from her seat. Young man, my husband was a veteran, and I know how proud your daughter will be to see you properly honored. Please accept these people's help. You've earned it 10 times over. As more passengers began expressing support and offering assistance, Marcus realized that Jessica's false accusations had inadvertently created something beautiful. What started as humiliation had transformed into a demonstration of how Americans should treat their veterans, with respect, understanding, and gratitude. Staff Sergeant Williams, Captain Chin said, I want you to understand something important. What happened here today with MS Montgomery represents the ignorance of a few, not the feelings of most Americans. The response you're seeing now, this is how our country really feels about its veterans. Jessica Montgomery had been standing quietly during the exchange, watching as her attempt to expose a fraud had instead revealed a genuine hero worthy of the highest respect. The reality of her mistake was sinking in, along with the recognition that her actions had caused real harm to someone who deserved better. "Staff Sergeant Williams," she said quietly, stepping forward again. "I want to apologize again, more sincerely this time. I was wrong about you, wrong about veterans, and wrong to make assumptions based on my limited understanding. I'm truly sorry for the pain I've caused you." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, seeing genuine remorse in her expression. "Ma'am, I accept your apology. I hope this experience helps you understand that veterans are just people trying to do their best with whatever challenges life has given them. We're not perfect, and we don't all fit the same mold." "I understand that now," Jessica replied, "and I promise to do better in the future." Captain Chun addressed the passengers who were still gathered around. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is a reminder that we all have opportunities to support our veterans, not just with words but with actions. Staff Sergeant Williams is going to his daughter's nursing school graduation tomorrow, and she's going to see her father honored the way he should have been honored 15 years ago." The passengers broke into spontaneous applause, many of them taking photos and videos to share with friends and family. What had started as documentation of a confrontation had become documentation of something far more meaningful. Rodriguez handed Marcus her business card. "Staff Sergeant, my hotel is downtown. I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and we'll get you completely outfitted for the ceremony." "Captain Chun, what time should we meet you at Northwestern Memorial?" "I'll be there at 1:30, in dress uniform," Captain Chun replied. "Staff Sergeant Williams, do you have a photo of your daughter? I'd like to be able to recognize her at the ceremony." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed them a picture of Sarah in her nursing student uniform. "She's beautiful," Rodriguez said. "She's going to be so proud when she sees her father properly honored." As the passengers finally began deplaning, Marcus felt a transformation taking place within him. The anxiety and humiliation of the confrontation had been replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: the pride and dignity that came with being recognized as a valued member of the military family. Tomorrow, his daughter would not only graduate from nursing school, but would witness her father receive the respect and honor he had always deserved but rarely received. It would be a day that neither of them would ever forget, a day that would remind them both that service and sacrifice are never forgotten by those who truly understand their meaning. The stage was set for a graduation ceremony that would become much more than an academic milestone. It would become a moment of healing, recognition, and redemption that would restore Marcus Williams to his rightful place as an honored veteran and proud father. The morning of Sarah's graduation dawned bright and clear in Chicago. Marcus Williams stood before the mirror in his complimentary hotel room, adjusting the dress blue uniform that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had helped him obtain the previous evening. The uniform fit perfectly, and for the first time in 15 years, he looked like the soldier he had once been. The Purple Heart Medal was pinned precisely on his chest, alongside his combat infantry badge and service ribbons. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened the decorations, not from anxiety this time, but from emotion. Today, his daughter would see him as he truly was, not just her father, but a decorated veteran who had served his country with honor. Rodriguez arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, also dressed in her formal military uniform. "Staff Sergeant Williams, you look outstanding," she said with genuine admiration. "Your daughter is going to be so proud." "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done," Marcus replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "Yesterday was one of the worst experiences of my life, but it led to something I never could have imagined." "That's what military family does," Rodriguez explained as they walked to her car. "We take care of each other, especially when civilians don't understand what we've been through." As they drove through Chicago's bustling streets toward Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Marcus thought about how he would explain the change in plans to Sarah. She was expecting her father in his usual casual clothes, sitting quietly in the audience. Instead, she would see him in full military dress, accompanied by an active duty soldier and a commercial airline captain, all there to honor his service. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the nursing school graduation ceremony was already bustling with activity. Proud families filled the auditorium seats while nursing students in their caps and gowns prepared backstage. Sarah Williams checked her appearance one final time, her heart racing with excitement about walking across that stage and officially becoming a registered nurse. She had called her father that morning to confirm he had arrived safely in Chicago, but the call had gone to voicemail. She assumed he was sleeping off the stress of his flight and would see him in the audience when the ceremony began. Captain Chun arrived at the hospital exactly at 1:30, his pilot's uniform pristine and his bearing military proud. He found Marcus and Rodriguez in the lobby, both looking nervous but determined. "Staff Sergeant Williams, you look like the hero you are," Captain Chun said warmly. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be, sir," Marcus replied. "I still can't believe you're doing this for me." "I'm not just doing this for you," Captain Chun explained. "I'm doing this for every veteran who's been misunderstood, overlooked, or disrespected. Your daughter is going to see something today that will change how she thinks about service and sacrifice." The three service members made their way into the auditorium, drawing curious glances from other attendees. Military uniforms always commanded attention at civilian events, but the combination of current and former service members suggested something special was happening. They took seats near the front, close enough for Sarah to see them when she walked across the stage. Marcus scanned the program, finding his daughter's name listed among the top graduates. His chest swelled with pride at her academic achievement. As the ceremony began, the nursing school dean took the podium to address the gathered families and graduates. "Today we celebrate not just academic achievement, but the dedication of young men and women who have chosen to dedicate their lives to healing and caring for others. These graduates represent the future of healthcare, and we are honored to send them into the world." When Sarah's name was called, Marcus stood proudly with the rest of the audience. But then something unexpected happened. Captain Chun stood as well, followed by Rodriguez, and suddenly they were applauding not just for Sarah's graduation, but for the daughter of a decorated veteran. Sarah looked out into the audience and froze. There was her father, but he looked completely different. Instead of his usual civilian clothes, he was wearing a military uniform she had never seen before, medals gleaming on his chest. Beside him stood two other people in military dress, all three applauding enthusiastically. She accepted her diploma in a daze, her mind racing to understand what she was seeing. As she walked off the stage, she kept looking back at her father, trying to process the transformation. After all the graduates had received their diplomas, the dean returned to the podium for closing remarks. But Captain Chun had requested permission to make a special presentation, and now he stood to address the gathered audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been given permission to recognize someone special in our audience today," Captain Chun announced, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium. "Yesterday, I had the privilege of meeting Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, a Purple Heart recipient and combat veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 3rd Infantry Division." Marcus felt his face flush as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. This was the kind of public attention he had always avoided, but today it felt different, respectful rather than intrusive. Staff Sergeant Williams was wounded in action while serving his country, losing his squad leader and 2 fellow soldiers in the same attack that injured him, Captain Chun continued. "He exemplifies the courage, dedication, and sacrifice that define the American military." The audience began to applaud, but Captain Chun raised his hand to indicate he wasn't finished. "Staff Sergeant Williams is here today to watch his daughter Sarah graduate from nursing school. Sarah, would you please join your father down here?" Sarah, still in her cap and gown, made her way down from the stage area to where her father stood. As she approached, she could see the Purple Heart medal clearly for the first time, and the reality of her father's service hit her with full force. "Dad?" she whispered, looking at the medals on his chest. "You never told me about these." "I wanted it to be a surprise for your graduation day," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. I wanted you to know that your old dad really did do something important, even if I came back a little broken. Captain Chun addressed Sarah directly. Your father is a genuine American hero. He was wounded defending the freedoms we all enjoy, and he spent the years since his service raising a daughter who has chosen to dedicate her life to helping others, just as he dedicated his life to protecting others. Sarah threw her arms around her father, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I've always been proud of you. You didn't need medals to prove anything to me, but they help explain why I'm the way I am sometimes, Marcus whispered to her. Why I have bad dreams, why crowds make me nervous, why flying is hard for me. It's not because I'm weak, it's because of what I gave up to serve our country. The audience watched the emotional reunion between father and daughter, many wiping away tears of their own. Captain Chun continued his presentation. Staff Sergeant Williams, on behalf of a grateful nation and all veterans who have served with honor, I want to present you with something you should have received long ago, a formal certificate of appreciation for your service and sacrifice. He handed Marcus an official document he had prepared overnight, recognizing his military service and Purple Heart Award. The gesture was symbolic but meaningful, representing the recognition Marcus had never received when he returned from deployment. Rodriguez stepped forward as well. Staff Sergeant Williams, I also want to present you with this. She handed him a folded American flag that had been flown over a military base in Afghanistan. This flag represents the continued service of American forces in the place where you were wounded. Your sacrifice helped make it possible for others to serve safely. The ceremony that had started as Sarah's graduation had become something much larger, a recognition of service, sacrifice, and the bond between military families. Other veterans in the audience stood and applauded, recognizing one of their own being properly honored. As the formal presentations concluded and families began to gather for photos, Sarah kept staring at her father in his uniform. Dad, you look so different. You look like a real soldier. I was a real soldier, honey, Marcus replied gently. But more importantly, I'm your father, and today I'm the proudest father in the world. You've chosen to spend your life helping people heal, just like the doctors and nurses who helped me heal when I came back from overseas. Is that why you supported me becoming a nurse? Sarah asked, understanding dawning in her eyes. Partly, Marcus admitted. I know how important it is to have people who care about healing not just bodies, but hearts and spirits too. You're going to make a difference in people's lives, just like you made a difference in mine. As they posed for photos together, Marcus in his dress uniform and Sarah in her graduation cap and gown, both of them knew this day would be remembered forever. It was the day Sarah officially became a nurse, but it was also the day her father reclaimed his identity as a decorated veteran worthy of respect and recognition. Captain Chun and Rodriguez joined them for several photos, creating a visual record of the military family that had formed through adversity and mutual support. The images would later be shared widely on social media, becoming symbols of how veterans should be treated and recognized. As the day concluded and they prepared to leave the hospital, Sarah took her father's arm. Dad, I want to hear all your stories now. The real ones about your service and what you went through. I'm old enough to understand, and as a nurse, I need to know how to help veterans who might be my patients someday. Marcus smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he had carried for 15 years. I'd like that, sweetheart. And maybe next time I fly somewhere, I won't be quite so nervous. Today reminded me that most people appreciate what veterans have done, even if they don't always know how to show it. The story that began with false accusations and humiliation had ended with honor, recognition, and a deeper understanding between a father and daughter. Marcus Williams had reclaimed his dignity. Sarah had gained new respect for her father's service, and everyone who witnessed the ceremony had learned something important about the true meaning of heroism and sacrifice. Most importantly, the incident had demonstrated that while ignorance and prejudice might temporarily wound the spirit, the bonds of military brotherhood and The gratitude of a free nation will ultimately prevail, ensuring that no veteran's service is forgotten or dishonored.